Hi everyone, welcome to my video. We're going to use 3-column notes today, and we are going to talk about Venn diagrams. You may have seen these before. This is the type of a question that I'm hoping you'll be able to solve after today. This is data that one of my colleagues collected on math education articles, and we were curious about this data set if there were more articles written by just one person versus a group of people compared to women versus not women. And so I have data about the total number of articles, the number of articles written by just one person, the number of articles written by at least one woman, and the number of articles that were written by just one person who was also a woman. And so we're going to talk about how to solve these types of problems. First, what is a Venn diagram? So it's basically an illustration. Generally, you're going to have circles that overlap. The overlap between the two circles represent overlapping in traits, and each circle represents a different trait. So in the situation in the previous problem, we have the trait of the number of authors, either a single author or not a single author. Articles authored by women versus articles not authored by women. Notice how I'm using a it is or it is not, so that it's either in the circle or outside of the circle. And then I've also identified the shared trait, which would be articles with single authors, with a single author, and written by a woman. So these are the steps I put together on how to create a Venn diagram. You may want to write these down so that as we're creating a Venn diagram, you can refer back to them. We need to determine the distinct traits, draw the circles, one circle for each trait, label the circles, identify the overlap, and then start filling in the numbers. And then we'll go with the rest of this when we get a little bit further along. So here's our question again. So we're going to pull out the key information. So the key info is the total number of articles, the articles by one author, the articles by women, and then combine the shared trait with one article by a woman and one author. So there's our trait 1, trait 2, and the overlap. So now I'm going to draw my diagram. So notice that because I have two traits, I'm going to have two circles. And I've also identified that I have the overlap. So the overlap I'm going to start with first. And I'm going to put the overlap in the overlap between the two circles. And I'm going to label the circle on the left one author, and the circle on the right women authors. So that means that this 7,000-ish represents articles by one author and by female authors. Now I need to figure out how many articles were written with one author and the one author was not a woman. And so to do that, you're going to need to pull out a calculator, and we're going to do a little bit of quick calculations, or you can do it in your head. So to find the number of articles written by just one author who was not a woman, we're going to take the total number of articles written by one author, and then we're going to subtract the number of articles with one author that were written by a woman. So we'll take 21,115 and subtract off 7,709. And when we do that math, we have 13,406. So that number goes here. So I want to point out that this circle on the left, when we add up those two numbers, that gives us the total number of articles with one author. And the overlap, this 7,000-ish, represents the one author who's a woman, and this 13,000-ish represents authors who are men who wrote articles by themselves. Now to find the number of articles with women authors, we're going to take the total number of women the 26,967, and we're going to subtract off the overlap. And we'll type that in and fill it out. All right, so when we do the subtraction, we get 19,258. So that means that there were 19,258 articles written by women when there was more than one author. So maybe two women or a woman and a man. And then of the articles who had women authors, this 7,000-ish were just one woman writing an article by herself instead of women writing in a group. So now we need to figure out how many articles fall outside of this. So this might be articles written by men, a group of men, because we don't have a circle that represents an article written by more than one man. And so we're going to add up our three values here and then subtract it by the total number of articles. All right, so when we take the 13,000-ish plus the 7,000 plus the 19, we get a total of 40,373. And so we're going to compare that to the total number of articles. So we'll take our 50,154 and subtract 40,373 to get our final answer. Okay, so that means we'll take this 9,781 and put it on the outside. So that means this diagram represents all the people who wrote all of the articles, each article, and we can determine how many articles had just one author that was not a woman. We can determine the number of articles that were written by a woman, one author, versus the number of articles that had at least one woman author, and then the number of articles whose authors were not women and there were more than one author. So now we're going to go on to the second part of the question. Okay, so the second part of the question asks us to determine the percent in each region of the Venn diagram and explain what it means. So first, when we're finding the percent, we're dividing the part by the whole. So in this case, we have the number of articles authored by one woman. And if we're only looking by one woman, would take that number and divide it by the total number of articles. And as a reminder, if you have a part divided by a whole, let's say you have 2 parts out of 10, it's going to give you a decimal. But if you want it as a percent, you multiply by 100. So that 0.2 multiplied by 100 gives you 20%. And so that's how you're going to convert your decimal to a percent. So in this situation, we're going to look at those numbers and we're going to pull up our Venn diagram that we just completed and change the numbers to percents. All right, so here's our Venn diagram. And so to find the percents, we're going to take the total numbers that we had and divide each piece by the total. So for the one author, we're going to take our 13,406 and divide it by the total number of articles. So the 50,154. And so when we type that into our calculator, we're going to, of course, get a decimal. So when we type that in, we get 0.267. I'm going to round it to one more decimal place. And now we'll take our one female author divide it by 50,154. And when we do that, we're going to get 0.1537. And our last, we'll take 19,258 and divide it by 50,154. And when we type that one in, we have 0.38397. So that's going to round up to 0.3840 because we got 0.383977. And we're rounding to 4 decimal places. So we're looking at this one right here. So the 7 bumps the 9 up, and because the 9 gets bumped up, the 3 gets bumped up as well. And the last one, 9,781, again over the total number of articles, 50,154. And when we plug that one in, we get 0.1950. And a quick check to make sure you did your math right. If we add up 0.26 plus 0.15 plus 0.38 plus 0.19 or 0.2, it should come out really, really close to 1 or 100%. If it's not, you know you might have made a mistake. And lastly, if we convert these to percents, we have 26.73% when you multiply that by 100. 15.37%, again, you multiply the decimal by 100. And 38.4% when you multiply it by 100, and 19.5%. So now we know that about 15% of the articles were written by a single female. About 26% were written by one author who was not a woman. 38% were written by more than one author, and at least one of them was a woman. And 19.5%, almost 20%, were written by more than one author who were men. So in summary, we talked about how to create Venn diagrams from word problems, how to fill in the circles and find the key characteristics and find the percent in each region. So I want you to look ahead now. And here's an extension problem. I'm going to ask you to pause the video and try this one on your own. After you've completed it, I want you to resume the video and compare what you've done to the answer that I will provide you. To just help you out, we've got 356 students total. 171 of them come from all majors and prefer online classes. And in this study, there were 204 students who were majoring in social sciences. 96 students who were majoring in social sciences preferred online classes. So a thing to note in this is when I say there's 204 students who are majoring in social sciences, some of them preferred online classes and some of them didn't. So while you're doing this, go through the steps. Let me put those up on the screen in case that might be helpful. So what are the traits in this problem? What's the overlap in the traits? So how many distinct traits do you have? Draw the correct number of circles, label your circles. What's the overlap? And then find each individual trait, subtract that overlap from that number, and then add up all of the pieces to find how many go outside of the circles. So I'll put you back on the problem. Go ahead and pause the video and check the answer once you have it. All right, these are the answers for the problem. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thanks for joining.